please join me in welcoming our amazing speakers. We have Diana Britton from wealthmanagement.com, Jillian Berry from Strong Her Money at RFG Advisory, Lacey Garcia at Willow, and Rainey Verby at PlanCorp.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. So we've all heard the stats, right? I don't have to rehash the stats that we've been hearing for, maybe the last decade. Women are inheriting a greater amount of wealth, but they fire their spouse's advisor. There's a problem here. But we don't want to kind of have the same conversations about serving women. And we're not going to be up here kind of finger wagging at you all and, burn down the patriarchy. We don't want to have that conversation up here. We want to take this conversation further and have a different conversation today. And so this is the group that's going to be able to do that. And so just to introduce our speakers, to my left here, we've got Jillian Berry, Senior Director of Strong Her Money at RFG Advisory. In the orange next to her, we have Lacey Garcia, founder and CEO of Willow. The website is trustwillow.com. And then to her left, we have Rainey Verby, Director of Wealth Management at PlanCorp. And so one thing that we've heard is that women investors want to work with female advisors. But the number of female advisors the representation continues to be low in the industry, and the needle just doesn't seem to be working. So it seems to be moving, I guess. So women, I want to discuss. Should we be discussing the lack of female advisors in the industry? Should that be the discussion today? Lacey, do you want to start?
Yes. First, I just want to say thank you to Diana. Thank you to Futureproof, to Matt, to Malaya, to everybody who's put on this amazing conference. My first time here, and it's so fun. Obviously, great content. Delighted to be here and delighted to answer that question. I have to say, when I founded Willow back in 2019, the whole idea was to help all advisors, men, women, advisors of all genders, to be able to better acquire, grow, and retain trusted relationships with women investors. We are looking around this room, even where I'd say we've done a much better job, but at the high end, maybe 30% of the financial advisors are women. And just by 2030, women are going to control 16 trillion more dollars wealth in the U.S. alone. So, you guys do the math, right? This is such a bigger opportunity. And I want to turn it over to my, my co-panelists to be able to answer, but I got lots more stories on why it is just so critically important and why men can do just as good a job and sometimes an even better job working with women investors.
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly right. That the conversation about more female advisors is not the wrong conversation to have. It's just not the only conversation we should be having. That men are just as capable of learning to listen like women do. Women listen to caregive. Women listen for what they can do for you. Men can do the exact same thing. And as we educate men on how to work with women, it's going to uplift their relationship with their spouse, their daughters, their friends, their family. It just applies all across the board. So there's nothing wrong with having this conversation about how all advisors can serve women better.
Absolutely. And I believe that serving women is not just a conversation for women. I believe that women have the upper hand because we understand each other, because we have that lived experience, but men easily can be trained to serve women well by better understanding their life transitions and their experiences, their journeys throughout that, better understanding how they communicate and their decision making, because that is a different capacity when people who when women are communicating and having decision making, they work with a lot of their community around them, and so that really does impact the way that they make financial decisions throughout their life transitions.
I love where this conversation is going. Jillian, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Strong Her Money initiative. It's a program at RFG Advisory that is giving the general population of advisors, men and women at the firm, the resources and education to better serve female investors. So what are you kind of doing to equip advisors in that way, and what have been some of the results?
Yes, so we are taking this in a 3-focused approach. So we approach it at knowledge, resources, and community. So for knowledge, we really focus on serving all of our advisors by helping them understand the market for women, understanding how to position themselves, how to have thought leadership within that market. But then we have on-demand training for track-based focuses for each life transition. So like caregiving, entrepreneurship, widowhood, divorce, if a woman's experienced an inheritance. So we have track-based training for those advisors. And then we couple that with one-to-one personalized coaching so that as the advisors are taking that training, they really can implement it into their practice that best serves them. And then through that, they gain resources both for themselves. So for their toolkits, they have the ability to have resources for sales enablement and marketing, which is co-branded. And then they also have that for their clients. So they have financial literacy tools for their clients to facilitate those better conversations throughout each life transition. And then again, we have that community aspect, both virtual and in person, to make sure that we are supporting them throughout their journeys as an advisor.
That's great, and that program relaunched this week.
It did yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, Lacey, I know Willow is also helping advisors to better retain and grow business with women through your Advisor for Women certificate and marketing and client matching program. What does that training look like?
Yes. So our Advisor for Women certificate program is focused on equipping advisors with the training, the resources, the tools, and also the credentials to be able to not only retain existing female clients, but to better attract, connect, and grow trusted relationships. And at the end, we also do have some client matching where we make introductions to those advisors who've earned their Advisor for Women certificate program. But as Jillian was saying, it is, these skills can be taught. Sometimes they're innate. We look at women, men, yes, women in many ways are uniquely qualified to better listen, to better understand, to better empathize if they have these shared life journeys and experiences. I'm a divorced woman. I'm a mother. Of course, I'm going to connect a little bit easier with other women who've had those experiences. But these are also things that can be trained, right? Understanding the data, the experiences. And we do that through our on-demand video training program where you can earn C credits towards your designations, because we know your time is precious and priceless and it's hard to get anything in. And secondly, we also do one-on-one behavioral coaching. And one of the first things we do when we start the program is we actually teach you how to integrate coaching into your practice, because having an understanding of behavioral finance concepts, the different methodologies, the different tools, the different questions you can ask to be able to engage those investors and be able to, once you are introduced on a phone call, instead of just launching into your sales pitch, to ask the right questions, to get them to open up and get them to tell you about who they are and what they're looking for, so they can walk away being like, wow, I really want to work with this person because they get me. And the final, the final piece of that also is that we do support them with marketing content and curriculum. And I just say, for everyone here in the audience, your digital presence, which you're hearing over and over again, is now, it's table stakes that you must have a good digital presence, because for the most part, every client you're going to be meeting who's going to be walking in the door, you're jumping on Zoom, they've looked you up online, right? So if your LinkedIn is not current, if it doesn't speak to who your why is, if you want to work with women clients, if it doesn't speak to why you would be a trusted advisor to them, then that's something you need to do. So we also help to make sure that the digital presence, which is the first way that really you're meeting these new prospective clients, or the daughter that's being introduced to you, or the friend, or the widow is coming in, you want to make sure that she knows before she even meets you that you're someone who she thinks she can connect with.
Yeah, well, I just want to say I think we're going to be taking questions via Slido. There should be a QR code, I think. But if you have any questions, submit those on Slido, and we'll try to get to those at the end. So, Rainey, I know Lacey touched on this a little bit, but can it be taught? Can advisors be taught to serve women?
Absolutely. And I think, I inherited, when I came to PlanCorp 6 years ago, I inherited this great team of advisors who already naturally was building some of this empathy. They work together as one team and listen to each other, which I think is incredible. So I take no credit for what I walked into. But as we educate young folks, we've really gone into heavy behavioral finance training for our team and operationalized it so that we're learning to ask better questions of every single person, right? Lacey and I talked for 5 minutes and we're already sharing our supplement routines and probably, how much we spend on functional medicine because the doctors can't do it with the hormones. Like, we're gonna talk about those things and we talk about them quickly. But if you're not uncomfortable with that, great. It doesn't have to be a woman. We can connect over 1,000 different things in our lives, right? Because women are also not a homogenous population. Some of us like sports, many of us don't. Some of us like theater, many of us don't, right? So not everybody's a mom. Not everybody has 5 children that they're running around after. Everyone wants different things. And so it's all about the connection that you're building. Find a commonality and then get comfortable with being uncomfortable because we're gonna talk about menopause.
100%.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add on to that too, because with, there's many studies that show that women don't necessarily have a preference if they want to work with men or women advisors.
That's right.
But women do prioritize trust, communication, and shared values.
Right.
But another thing that came across a lot of my research is, like, when you think about this and you have 50% of women choosing a female or male advisor, but only 20% of women in our industry are financial advisors, who do you think's capturing this market the best? Like, this is not only a decision to serve women for good, but it positions your business to serve better. We're looking at a market that's set to inherit, we're $34 trillion in investable assets by 2030. They're also 2.5 times more likely to refer when they're served well. And there's even research showing that with financial education, they're actually better long-term investors. So why would we not want to take this market seriously for all advisors?
That's right. And I think the education piece is really crucial there because you have to remember that, I'm 45. I was not socialized or taught to invest as a child. It wasn't something that I did. That's a little bit from not growing up with money. It's a lot growing up as a girl because you don't learn to do that. You learn how to run a household budget. You learn how to budget for your groceries and not shop too much. But we're stereotyped and we're put into this, consumer finance role that isn't the investor role. And so to not look down on the woman across the table from you because her husband did it for all these years, that's normal. That's normal for her. Anybody 50 and up, like, your husband did the finances, even if you did the day-to-day, right? And so all of those things are changing rapidly in front of our eyes, but you have to be empathetic to the person across the table from you. And I used to work with a partner that would say all the time, he would say, it's easy. You just A plus B. You just made the person across from you feel disempowered, ignorant at best, right? Because they didn't know it was easy. It might be, but let's not say it that way. Let's say it in a way that makes sense. Tell me what you know. Help me understand how I can explain it better. Let's walk back and let me explain it again a different way, right? Learning new teaching styles and new methodologies of communicating is incredibly important because this is just not something we grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, a huge business opportunity here, right? So Lacey, I know you were saying on our prep call that you're seeing a lot of men, male advisors, especially under 50, leaning into this market. What are you seeing from those male advisors that are really tuned into this market?
I know it's changed so much, particularly in the last few years, where we now are, instead of reaching out, they're coming to us, right? And particularly men who are under 50, we know that's not the majority of the industry today, but that is the future of the industry. For starters, there's so many different dynamics. I mean, in that group, half of the women are either or primary breadwinners, right? Their relationships, their marriages are very different. Like women are more and more so managing we know they're managing 70 to 80% of consumer decision making and power and all the healthcare decisions, but now they're also managing not just the household finances, but they're very involved, right? So they have that experience. Yes, whoever was clapping is right on to clap. And even more promising statistics, and I certainly, through my life experience, have been somebody who was raised in a traditional household, who expected, to be the non-financial spouse, right? The world has turned out, my journey has turned out very differently, and I've had to learn on my toes, and hence I started this company, so other women will have that path, and also to be able to help those folks along, because they are the greatest opportunity in wealth management and the greatest growth area moving forward.
Yeah, and so let's turn it the other way around. And Jillian, I know you kind of already talked about this a little bit, but are female clients open to working with men?
Absolutely. One thing I do want to point out, though, is when we think about decision making or communication styles, one of the key things that I've done in my own research is that women tend to grow within a community where men tend to be more individualistic. And this really impacts the way that we serve them. Because if women are making their decisions based on the people around them, that you need to involve their community when you're serving them. But here's another thought too, is that when women experience failure, this is something that they internalize as them failing their community instead of just themselves. And so that prevents hesitancy when it comes to, like, if they're business women, it prevents hesitancy, or it creates hesitancy when re-venturing into new business or new programs. It creates hesitancy in taking risk. And so when you're serving women, whether you're a male or female advisor, taking into that context of how you're serving them throughout their journeys, because usually when someone's transitioning from one portion of their life to the next, it usually does encompass some sort of loss. And so you need to take that into consideration when serving them.
And I think women carry the weight of financial decisions differently, right? And Lacey, you pointed out that there are more and more women who are the breadwinners of their households. And again, we weren't socialized to be the breadwinners, and our husbands were not socialized to not be the breadwinners. And so there's a careful dynamic that we might be tiptoeing around in terms of masculinity that we don't want to come out and say, well, it's my money. My money is our money, right? Or, and I see my kids observe that, and I see them live it and experience it, and my husband's incredible, but it's helpful to me for my advisor to be very aware of that dynamic and very aware that I do want to bring him in on decisions. I recently asked my husband about buying more equity in my firm, and he was like, do you really want my answer here, or have you decided and you're running it by me? And I said, listen, there are 3 or 4 scenarios that I can lay out to you that if you say this, I would take it into account and I would change my decision, because that's my job as a partner, right? It's my job to my work partners. It's my job to my life partner, right? But also, yes, I've pretty well made the decision. I just predicted the 4 things I thought you were going to say. But that's what I had to do to be able to make that decision, right? Because my decision influences my kids, my husband, my parents, everyone around us, because I think communally. That's how I was socialized to think. So I think as an advisor, just remembering that, and not saying, well, what would your husband think of this decision? But have you talked about this decision to the people who are really important to you in your life?
That's great. That is so true. And also, to sort of build on that, I also think that gender, but also generation, plays such a big role here. I mean, if we're looking at women in their 50s and above, maybe we've gotten to half of us are investing at this point. I'm not quite there yet, but anyway, but if you look at Gen Z, 77% of women who are Gen Z are walking in the door invested in the stock market. I mean, it's amazing, right? The conversation is so very, very different. So, and women are saying, we know all the data about how women, not just older women who are outliving their husbands or getting divorced, the widows, the divorcees, but also the younger women that are choosing to stay single. And I think the stat is by 2030 that 45% of all women age 22 to 44 are gonna be single by choice. And and they're not just inheriting. I see clapping, but they're wealth creators, right? They're double inheritors from the wealth transfer, and then they are creating wealth. So I think that generational piece, it's not just a conversation, but it is a real conversation. I will say, for a lot of the folks who focus on the retiree market, it is a real conversation. If you don't have a relationship with her, she's going to leave.
Yeah.
She's going to leave. And and it's not impossible. You might be like, I've tried. You can figure it out. If you've had a relationship with him and you've done a good job, I feel pretty confident that you can figure out how to build a relationship with her.
Make it work.
Yeah.
So this might be a little bit controversial, but should we be talking about women as a singular group? They're all individuals after all. I don't know who wants to take
I'll
that.
take this one. I get this question a lot. I even got this question yesterday as we were talking about Strong Her Money at our launch. There's so many reasons why we need to acknowledge this as a group, that we need to truly understand their needs. Because again, I keep talking about having different communication styles, different decision-making styles. But when we look at each life transition, and if we are looking at a woman in business, and they're going throughout their life, and say one is a caregiver, the studies show that caregiving needs tend to fall way more on women than men. So that's one aspect of, when we think through retirement savings, if a woman has to step out to care for their children or even care for their parents, especially as someone in my generation right now where I'm doing both, that impacts my money and that impacts my retirement, way more skewed for women than men. So that's just one aspect of a life transition that we need to look at. But when we think about widowhood, women outlive men, and so we have to think about all those different aspects. So there's just so many different ways that we can look at this as to why we actually need to focus on women as a group.
Right, and not to put too fine a point on it, but this is easy in terms of our discovery process, right? So one of the questions I always ask in discovery is, are your parents still living? No matter the age of the client across from me, because I'm not gonna ask, but are your parents still living? And if yes, do you have siblings? Because if you do not, or even if you do and your siblings are male and you're the female, especially if you're the oldest female, that burden of caregiving is going to fall on you. So I need to know, if I'm going to serve you as your advisor, I need to know your parents' financial situation, if you're going to be financially supporting them or your in-laws, because if you're the daughter-in-law, guess what? It falls to you too. So knowing in advance what your broader family situation is, because again, that community matters. Women make decisions in the context of that whole community. I need to know everything about you. So the way we do discovery is going to be just a little bit different. It's going to feel really intense, like you're asking questions that you might not need to know the answer to. But the truth is, you absolutely do, to serve that woman well, to serve that family well.
I would say, I say this all the time, but what women are looking for may seem like common sense, but it's not common practice. Mm-hmm. Have you started by asking, what is your financial role within the family?
Yeah.
Start there.
Right.
Hear from her in her own words, and then you can actually understand versus just trying to assume, trying to guess, and making mistakes.
And I just failed to take my own advice. I said it's easy. It's not easy for everyone. It's a learned skill.
Yeah, that was a great point, Rainey, because, I've been talking to a lot of women my age, and, we've got young kids, and we've also got aging parents, and we're in that kind of sandwich generation trying to take care of both at the same time. And so, that's definitely a challenge. So, I know, Lacey, you mentioned that, a lot of men are connecting with women on a personal level. Maybe they had a single mom or parents who were divorced. Maybe they saw something firsthand with a sister. But I'd love to hear about just your own personal experiences with money. My podcast is about personal stories, and so it's near and dear to my heart. So I'd love to hear just your own personal experiences with finances with money. Lacey, maybe you want to start?
Sure. No, I if you'd asked me 25 5 years ago when I started my career, or you told me that I'd be sitting here today, I would have never expected it, right? I started my career in the education, the nonprofit sector. I was an educator, I was a coach. I expected to stay home with my children when I got married. And life happens, right? Things turn out to be very, very different. Certainly you can fill in a lot of blanks along the way, but I had to learn things that I shouldn't have had to learn on the fly, right? Given my background and my education, there are things that I should have known already that I just didn't know. And that is why, my sort of personal experience is one first within as a person and a personal kind of relationship with money. I definitely didn't know a lot of things that I should have known, and I definitely didn't take control. I had passed it off, and I had to clean it up, and I had to take control, and that was not easy. And it wasn't easy, especially because at the same time I'd actually recently gone into becoming a financial advisor. So here I am helping other people, right, with their money while I didn't have it all together, And so I had that experience of working with and I was in the ultra high net worth private banking space. And because I was an educator, because I was a coach, I was able to really deeply connect. And I was able to deeply connect with my women and the next generation of clients, right? Those skill sets, which is what we're talking about today, and bringing those skill sets into the mainstream in this new paradigm where the clients, women and also millennial and Gen Z clients, are really looking for you to be holistic financial planning, not just advice, focus on, being their coach, right? All these things. So I had that experience, and I also was, in the industry, and I was able to see kind of firsthand a lot of these things that were happening that really, we hear about, and until you see it in a meeting or on a Zoom call, there's just so many biases and so many, not looking at her, even though she made it clear before the meeting that she was the one with all the money. She's the one with the money. She's the one with the decision making. And then, my colleague would still be just looking at him and asking questions. These things really happen. They really do. And they're things that, honestly, we need to train young advisors. We need to train. We can all learn, new tricks as we get older as well. These are the types of things that will make you lose her.
Yeah, I would share. I mean, I started my career as a CPA, and I decided to be a CPA when I was like 11 years old. It's kind of a ridiculous story, but I really believe that mothers tend to raise their oldest daughters to be the person that they wanted to be, right? And I think that's what my mom did. And I knew very early on I wanted to be a breadwinner. I wanted to be independent. But for me, the point that I focused on was making the money, right? My dad drove for UPS. My mom stayed at home and from time to time took jobs because she was helping with the finances, but it was helping. It wasn't earning, right, in the same way. And so eventually my mom started her own business and ran an in-home daycare for 20 years and was incredibly successful doing what she knew how to do best. And so coming into accounting, I knew that I would have this career that would be all about numbers, and all I knew was that I could earn. What I didn't know was how to save. What I didn't know was how to invest. And so until I got my CFP over a decade later, I had no idea. I relied on a friend who was a financial advisor to give me basic advice in my 401k. So I got to, age 35 or so, I come into wealth management, and my peers have way more money than I do because they've been in this industry the whole time and they've been learning and knowing how to do it. And so I felt behind. It's why I started writing. It's why I started putting content out, because I really love telling that story that, you're not alone. You're not alone if you're not a 40-year-old billionaire. You're not. Social media might make you feel like you are, and you can never recover, right? But the reality is there are so many of us that are learning and changing those habits, right? I didn't plan to have this husband, kids, house, 2 cars, all the white picket fence things, but here we are, and this is what it looks like, right? So how do I change my spending habits? How do I accommodate for things like education costs? My husband's a high school teacher in the very best public high school in the state of Missouri, and I tell him, he had the balance sheet, I had the income statement, right? Because we don't have to send our kids to private school. The way I think about money is all informed in the beginning by my parents, who were going paycheck to paycheck, right? But then it becomes informed by my job and my community and the people who I'm around. And I think it's just incredibly important to keep learning all through your life, because you're never done. You're never done learning.
What is the name of your blog? Tell us your blog so we can check it out.
Girlmeetsmoney.com.
Girlmeetsmoney.com. Jillian?
Yes. So my money story is probably similar and different from yours, but I grew up with a very limited view on what money could mean to me in my life. I was not taught about money growing up. We did not have conversations about money in my household. And it wasn't until I started running some of my first businesses that I really even learned how to invest and, take that and go to my next business. But I did that all on my own. No one talked to me. I had to research everything and kind of do everything on the fly. But then when I got married, I'm dealing with my children. I'm dealing with my businesses. I'm not dealing with my household stuff. I just don't have the capacity. So I left that to my husband to deal with. But then I recently got divorced, and all of a sudden I'm in charge of all my finances. I had to buy my husband out of my house. There's so many things that now I have on a day-to-day basis that it's overwhelming for women because we're handling so many other things that this does become a burden sometimes in all the things that we have to think about outside of that even for women, we're very smart, we're very capable humans, but there's so many things on our plate that sometimes it's just we need that extra help from financial advisors to really work with us and educate us on what we can do with that.
And asking for help is hard, right? Because you're supposed to do it all. You're supposed to. But what do we tell our clients? Why are they our clients? Why are they paying us? Because you want to do the things that are important to you in life and let us take care of this side of the house for you, right? We need that care too. We need a financial advisor too.
And I believe some of the latest research says as many as 76% of women who are working with a financial advisor are reliant on that financial advisor for all of their decisions. If you do a good job and she trusts you, then I know I reach out to my advisor, who's a man, by the way, and it was also my father's advisor. So I'm like, whoa. I have to say that it's possible.
You're the exception.
Yeah. I have to say it is possible. But he also, I was just recently sick, and who was texting to check in and see how I was doing and if I needed anything? My advisor.
That's great. Yeah. Real stories up here. I'm going to take a couple questions from the audience. There's one here about, does the financial planning process need to change as more women are the breadwinners?
Yes, I was hoping you would ask that question because I can see it up here. I think the answer is yes, because you have to plan for things differently, like a break from work for caregiving, whether that's a leave, because many women do not have paid parental leave in this country. If you don't have it in your firms for both women and men, you should reevaluate that policy immediately. But really, that's part of keeping women in the workforce altogether. But women are going to need flexibility, and they are going to need breaks around those caregiving seasons, because like it or not, we are going to have to take care of our aging parents. We are going to have breaks when our kids are teenagers that they need us more and they need us disproportionately. And guess what? Then we all know it's going to drop off a cliff when they go to college. So women need breaks in their career. I think we need to plan for that differently. We don't need to plan that the retirement is only at age 50 or 60 or 65. We need to plan for maybe sabbatical portions of the career for caregiving, where you might not necessarily have to live off of your portfolio, but what does your emergency fund look like so you could caregive for a year and not earn and save any money? So yes, I think the financial planning assumptions have to change. Maybe not the process itself. Our tech stacks are still good, but the way we make assumptions about how a career is going to be. Women's careers are not linear. We don't always earn more and more and more. We're more willing to take a step back to learn and grow into a new field. I think there are a lot of those assumptions we just need to challenge when the female is the breadwinner across the table.
Agree with that 100%. Just like changes in the market require a new approach to investing, changes in demographics require a new approach to how we are planning, right? In the conversation, to your point, I think the process itself, but being aware, the awareness around these different life transitions, changes. Depending upon the situation, the gender pay gap also plays a role. All these things, it is yes, it must evolve, right? Because the reality is that the audience in the face of wealth has and is continuing to evolve.
And Rainey, I like that you talked about nonlinear growth paths, because that goes for your clients and the programs that we build. When women are taking all these different life transitions and have to pivot and then go down the next transition, that impacts their money. But also when we're building programs like this, when we have to think about the community, we have to think about what is impactful to support them best. And that is what we're thinking through is, okay, if a woman is going to, take 3 years out of their career to care for their young children, during that time they may be getting higher education. They may be doing other things to benefit their career, so when they come back, they can get to that next level. So what does that look like? And we talk a lot about career changers, whether that's into this service or out of this service, and we need to be prepared on how to, serve those women who have those nonlinear growth paths.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question from the audience: what are the most effective ways firms can create environments where women advisors thrive and stay? Jillian.
I'll start on this one because I actually really
the bit for that.
Yes, no, because I for my design aspect, I love talking about this because when we walk into an environment, we want to feel welcomed. We don't want to walk in feeling like it's a very corporate, masculine space that we don't belong in. We want to walk in and feel like we have some design aesthetic. Like we talk about even walking into the reception area and having nice mugs instead of paper cups, having things on the wall that pictures that represent us, and having, when you're in the office, sitting down and meeting with your advisor, having a space where you feel like it's comfortable to, be relaxed and let down your guard and be able to have a comfortable conversation with your advisor. It's really important to set the scene first to be able to start having the ability to start opening up.
I think there are physical things like that I remember when a previous firm I was with remodeled, and they put these chairs in the client meeting rooms that were like those strung chairs that were really low to the ground. You can't sit in those chairs if you're wearing a skirt. It's just not humanly possible. So literally thinking about those physical things that are comfortable, but thinking about the benefits that you need to provide to those women in terms of flexibility. I mean, the hybrid workforce, even in places where it hasn't really changed yet, it has to change. We've got to have the level of flexibility so that we don't feel judged when we leave at 3:30 to go pick up our kids, even if she got in at 7 in the morning. But people don't see her get in, people see her leave, right? And so there is something about the hybrid approach that really speaks to that they can come and go as they please, and as long as the work gets done and the metrics are met, it all works out the same. And so I think we're evolving really naturally into that space that is more beneficial for women to have the flexibility, but we also have to support it with benefits, medical care, and parental leave.
Paid parental leave.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I want to ask just a fun question to you all to wrap things up here. What was the worst job you've ever had? Whoever wants to start.
I'll go because we shouldn't end with my story.
Job,
but it's
maybe.
Honestly, it's a little bit of the best and a little bit of the worst, because it was the job that got me into my career as a financial planner, and I truly did love so many aspects about it. But I was at a point in my life where I was starting to think about having my kids, and the most important things to me were parental leave, and I took a step back. I made a choice, I don't need to be a partner. I don't need to be the one in leadership. I need to be just the one who comes in and works with the clients and takes orders and takes notes, and I'll be fine with that. And so it wasn't the worst job because of anything they did. It was the worst job because I wasn't being authentic to myself at all. And I realized after 5 years and 2 children there that wasn't gonna work for me. And I think leaving that was devastating, because I was leaving deep client relationships that was, I didn't want to leave behind. I loved serving clients, but to really intentionally go look for somewhere where they had a culture that fit me better and where I could grow and evolve into the leader that I actually wanted to be, that was my worst job experience. But I also did sell fur coats, which was awful.
That's great. I have a similar story to that, in that I had the honor and the privilege of being asked to actually head up the Centennial, the Capital Campaign, all the events for a prestigious college. And I was hired by the chairman of the board and the president of the college, And then I showed up on campus, and nobody else was really excited that I'd been hired externally to come and do this. So you can imagine that it was a little bit of an uphill battle to build consensus in the beginning. Although we got through it, it was definitely one of the best experiences of my life. Everything turned out great, and actually, it's very known for entrepreneurship. And while I was there, I actually started. I had taken this little break from being a financial advisor. I planned on going back, and instead I started Willow because I was in that environment. So it worked out, but there were some rough moments.
I typically love where I work. Wherever I work, I find joy in what I do. But I will say the one that stood out to me was, so I have 4 children, and my oldest just turned 18. So this is when I first was pregnant with him. And what made that space just a horrible space is there was no accommodations for someone who is pregnant. So it was just, I could not let an ounce pass me by. I used to work in the fashion industry, and it's a very cutthroat industry, and trying to be pregnant and trying to work just was not.
Find the bathroom.
And find the bathroom, yes.
Always important.
So waddling into work at 8 months pregnant was not a joy in that space, so that's mine.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I'm getting the hook here, but just thank these ladies. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Diana.
For moving this conversation forward.